Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. In today's video I'm going to be discussing the 9 books that I read in January 2022. There were a lot of 1 stars, 2 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars, so I'm going to be starting from the 1 star and then taking you all the way to the 5 stars. And without any further ado, let's get started. Okay, so I'm constantly going to look into my phone just because I've made the list on my phone, and then I'm just going to go one by one. So the first 1-star book for me, I actually have a physical copy here. So the first 1-star book for me was The Death of Jane Lawrence. Even though this is a beautiful cover, and I think that was one of my main reasons for picking this one up. The biggest issue with this one was that it was trying to be too many things at once. So if we follow Jane, who is very analytical, as well as, you know, someone who's, it's hinted that she might be on the autism spectrum, because she is very logical, she's more attracted to numbers, she is someone who struggles with small talk as well as in social situations, and she is out looking for a husband. And what she's looking for a husband, essentially, the main trait is that she wants it to be kind of a business arrangement. So she meets Dr. Lawrence, who's also kind of a recluse and who's a doctor and, you know, who's respected, but he's very private about his private life. And one thing that Jane knows for sure is that he is not married. So they end up coming into this kind of business agreement where he and, you know, both of them will get married, but it will be very business-like, because he's going to just act as a doctor and she's going to be his accountant, but for the world they're like married. There's only one condition that Dr. Lawrence has, which is that he wants Jane to never come and live at his, you know, old ancestral home, where he's going to spend most of his nights, which is Lithridge Hall. Is that what it is? Lindridge Hall. And it's sort of this decrepit mansion, which is, you know, very ancestral to him, and he doesn't want her staying even one single night at Lindridge Hall. So they're going to sleep separately, which works very well for Jane. But an accident happens which leaves her stranded in front of Lindridge Hall on a night, and she ends up staying there. And then what she finds is a very different person than who she married. So instead of the analytical, logical doctor who's very composed and who's very mature, she finds this paranoid, kind of almost, you know, in a dreamlike state kind of a doctor. So this book was trying to be too many things at once. Why I said that? Because it's a perfect setting for, you know, Rebecca-esque Crimson Peak kind of a story, but it tries to be too many things. So it's like Mad Women in the Attic, it's also romance, it's also a gothic horror story, it's Jane Eyre, it's like so many things, and it tries to dabble into cult and into fantasy. And then the more it kind of dabbles into these things, the more confusing it gets. But also, while it's getting confusing, it's so boring. Like, it was just so boring. That's one of the reasons why I rated this 1 star. The twist at the end would have literally made me give this 5 stars if I had understood what the book, you know, what was happening in the major chunk of the book. So that's one of the reasons why I ended up giving this 1 star. And this is, fortunately or unfortunately, the only 1-star book on this list. So the rest of the 8 books are pretty 2 stars and above. So let's jump on to our 2nd-star book, which I gave 2 stars, is The Heart Principle. Now this is the 3rd book in the Kiskoshan series. This was supposed to follow one of the other characters, whose name is Quan, and we've already been introduced to him in the first 2 books. I was really looking forward to this one because I was so interested in knowing his story. But why I ended up giving this book 2 stars and kind of skimming through most of it was because I hated the main character. Like, I cannot explain how much I did not like Anna. She was someone who would just let other people step on her, and she was incapable of saying no. She was not just incapable of saying no, she was also someone who had zero to little or no self-respect for herself, which is just, you know, something that is very hard to read. Like, I understand a character who's introverted and who has issues with saying no and who has issues with, you know, setting boundaries, but then there's a very fine line between saying, you know, not being able to say no and not respecting yourself. And Anna was definitely on the no self-respect zone for herself. So it was very hard for me to read through this, and I ended up giving it 2 stars. This is a very famous book, so I'm guessing almost everyone knows what it's about. Another reason for giving this 2 stars was that Quan, whom I was really interested in knowing more about, was kind of like on the backseat throughout the whole book. And the only character trait he had really was to be supportive for Anna, and I was not on board with that. So he was so different, and he was not the pillar of strength that he was in the other two books. So that's why I ended up giving this 2 stars, and I was not having a fun time reading this. Okay, so the next category is 3-star books, and for this category I have, I think, 4 books or 3 books. I have 3 books in this category. So the very first one is How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell. I gave this 3 stars because I thought this was interesting. It makes a very interesting case for, you know, how to have that space where you don't always have to be doing something or be in that hustle culture of gig economy. It's okay to take rest. It's okay to you know, do things that are not seen as productive, or be in fields that are not seen as productive. Like, she talks about a lot of arts, and she talks about bird watching and so many other things, and I enjoyed this, but as overall I thought a lot of the chapters were just missing the point entirely. Like, they were not at all, they were interesting chapters, but they had nothing to do with the theme, which is to do nothing. And then there were chapters that were just so muddled. Like, I think she was just going on a different tangent, and I was having a hard time like really understanding what her, you know, big argument was in those chapters specifically. So I ended up giving this 3 stars. But it's a very interesting read, and I love the cover. I think it's really gorgeous. So, you know, in case anyone wants to pick this one up and try it, I would say definitely go for it. It was an average read. I'm glad I read it, but if I hadn't read it, I don't think I would have missed out much. So that's why it's on the 3-star list. The next 3-star book that I read was Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell. I think this would have been a great read for me for fall, because this follows like that pumpkin patch-esque season where, you know, everyone is in that autumn fall zone where the fall, you know, the trees are falling and you're having a great time in the corn maze. And in this one we also follow 2 seniors who are kind of depressed because they're going to go on, you know, into different colleges, and they're never going to be working again in this, I think it's like a farm, like in that pumpkin farm. So they're kind of sad that they won't be working with each other again, and so they it's their last night and they want to make the best of it. So they go from, like, you know, the different activities that are at the farm, and they want to complete all those activities. It was fun following them, but I don't think anything stuck out to me. Of course, in terms of representation and in terms of diversity, Rainbow Rowell is always on top of that. So it was fun reading like diverse characters, and it was fun looking at them, you know, in a because it's a graphic novel, so looking at them in the visual form. But I don't think that anything stuck with me from the whole book. Like, I don't think it was the greatest thing that I ever read, and I don't really also think that I enjoyed it because of the weather. Like, I read it in winter where everything's dead, and I'm not really feeling that fall feeling of, you know, beautiful colors and all of that. So I think that atmosphere was really different, and that's why I ended up giving it 3 stars. And the last 3-star book on the list is A History of Wild Places by Shaw Earnshaw. I was actually very hyped up for this. This was one of my first books that I read in January, and entire 2022, and this was not a disappointment, but it was a very predictable mystery. I have done kind of like a smaller reading review of this in another one of the videos. I'm just going to be linking that up here in case you're interested. You can go and watch that. But yeah, it was interesting, but it was very predictable, so I gave this 3 stars. Again, the highlight of the author is that she can just write anything and make it atmospheric. Like, it was so atmospheric. I was feeling that kind of, you know, spooky fantasy jungle vibes, and so not jungle, I would say forest vibes. So I had a fun time, but I wouldn't recommend it for the mystery. Our books, and the very first book that I read in this was Come With Me by Ronalda Amalfi. I enjoyed this. Again, it's a mystery thriller. I enjoyed this a lot. In this one we follow Aaron, who's recently lost his wife of 5 years prematurely, so she ends up going to a restaurant where there's a shooter, and the shooter accidentally ends up killing her. So, you know, Aaron is dealing with a lot of trauma, not just because of the death of his wife, but also the circumstances in which she died. And as we follow him, we just really see him like a man who's completely broken and who was in love, and, you know, it's very sad when you first start reading it. It's very sad, and the whole book is written not to the reader but to the wife. So it's written in first perspective, and he's addressing his wife rather than addressing like us, or, you know, the absent audience. And it was interesting to read. Like, the plot really starts rolling when he gets a box of his wife's from her workplace, and they've packed everything up and they send him back, and he initially thinks to, you know, just throw it in the fire and burn that all, but he ends up actually going through them, and he finds a receipt for a motel which is almost halfway across the country. So that leads him into a lot of questions, like why was she there, and like what was she doing, and whom was she with, and all of these questions. As he really starts you know, getting deeper and deeper into it, a lot starts to get uncovered. So there are a lot of murders, there's a lot of mystery, there's a lot of connections, there's a lot of, you know, very interesting facts that come out, and I think the twists and turns are really nice. But what I really liked about it was how the mystery is maintained. So usually in mysteries there would be like a sudden up, and then there would be a lull, and then there another clue, and then a lull, and then a red herring and a lull. But in this it was kind of very stagnant, and the mystery was maintained. So I ended up reading it on audio as well as in physical in about a day. So I think that was what made me give this 4 stars, just for the reading experience. Another interesting thing was, like, a lot of the initial, you know, tropes were kind of cleared out early. So as you would read, you'd think, oh, she was cheating on him or something like that, but the author clears that pretty soon. The only downside to this one, I would say, is that sometimes while he's talking or he's in dialogue with another character, he will address the character in you, or the character will address him as you. And when I was reading it on audiobook, I didn't really know if he was addressing his wife, because he's always, you know, calling his wife like, you did this, and I was so crazy and, you know, in love with you, and blah blah blah. So when he's addressing his wife, and then he's addressing the character, and then he's again addressing the wife, so it gets very confusing, like, who is he addressing? Is he addressing, you know, us, the wife, the reader, or is he addressing like the literal character in the book? So that was just the only confusing part, but overall I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars. The 4-star book that I ended up reading was The Girl from the Sea by Molly Ostertag? I don't know. And this one was 4 stars just because of, again, like, it's a graphic novel, but it's so pretty, and it just has everything in it, you know. I really liked it. I got to know so much about Selkie culture. I didn't know it was an actual mythology where people in Ireland and Scotland believed that seals would actually take human forms and come and, you know, help humans, and then kind of help their harvest and, you know, in fishing and all of that. And this played a lot on that. So it was very interesting, and it's very cute. I'm not gonna, there's not much. I mean, it's a very standard young adult graphic novel, and it's obviously LGBTQIA. The main character is a lesbian, but overall it was very interesting to read because the artwork is so cute. Like, the artwork is just amazing. God, I dropped my phone. But and just the mom character and all the, you know, family characters and everything like that. And then there are these pages where the group of 4 best friends, they text each other, and that part is like done so well. I'm just trying to find out where it is. Yeah, so it's kind of like this. So they're chatting in a group chat here, and then she's, you know, speaking separately to one of the girls, and I think that was really well done, you know, as far as texting goes. So I really enjoyed this, and I gave this 4 stars. 5-star books. I have 2 5-star books on the list, and I am excited to talk about both of them. Looking back, I would say both of them were not like 100% perfect, but they made me feel really good at that time. So I think that's why I ended up giving them both 5 stars. So my first 5-star read of the year was Wrinkles by Paco Roku. This is again a graphic novel, and it follows a group of friends in a nursing home. So they're older, you know, men and women who have been put there by their, you know, younger children, and there's a kind of hierarchy in this nursing home. So the people who are able to do the things on their own, they are on the first floor, and then the people who are kind of looked down upon are the patients who have dementia or any other memory issue, and they're on the second floor. So one of the characters that we follow, he actually has dementia, but he's, you know, trying to hide it because he doesn't want to go onto the second floor, and, you know, just doesn't want to lose his sense of self. I think what made this book, except for the fact that it's so unique and intriguing, another aspect of why this book, like why this graphic novel really worked for me, was because there's a lot of discussion on memory and self and identity, and how you end up like losing identity as you start losing your memory, because what really is a person without their memories? You know, your past your future, your present essentially makes you, your wishes and your dreams and your wants. So if you start losing that part of yourself, if you start losing those memories, then what really is your identity? And I think that was a very interesting question. But it's also very emotional because you follow these people here who have, of course, been abandoned by their children. No one comes to meet them, you know, on Christmas days as well as other days. And then all they have is each other and this friendship that they're, you know, making here. And it's just so heartwarming to see them. So that's why I ended up giving this 5 stars. So this was my first 5-star read. This is the final and the 9th book that I read. That again was my second 5-star book of the month, of the year, not the month, as well as the month, I guess, yeah, but of the year mostly, and that was A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. Now this one says A Dowry of Blood 1, so I guess it's a series, but it was amazing. Like, it was actually, it's just, I think, 6 hours long on audiobook, and again, I read through it. I was actually reading through it when I was at work because I just could not control myself. I wanted to know what is going to happen next, and in this one it's kind of a reimagining of Dracula's wives, and again, it's very epistolary and it's written in a way where the first wife of Dracula, I think in this she's named Constanza, she's the one who's addressing Dracula. The interesting thing about this is there are like so many underlayers to this. Like, she doesn't actually ever address him by his name. She's always kind of you know, saying my beloved and this and that. So she's literally taking the power of a name away from him, even though we know that she's addressing Dracula. But it's so interesting to see that she has been given a voice and she's using her voice in naming people that she actually loves and cares about. And so this starts with I mean, I'm just going to read like the first line of the book, and then I think anyone would get hooked. So the first line of the book is, "It was never my intention to murder you, not in the beginning anyway." And wow, when I read that first line, I knew that she was going to murder him, but I was still so intrigued to know why she murders him. And it's a great book because it plays a lot on toxic relationships, you know, how toxic relationships and abusive relationships really look like. It doesn't have to be that you know, he physically, like the person physically hits you or they torture you like physically and mentally. It can also be in an emotional way. It can also be that they make you completely dependent on them and then just, you know, leave you high and dry. So it's very interesting. And then of course, because Dracula had 3 brides, there are 3 characters in this. Because it's a very short book, I don't want to spoil anything. I just want people to read it and kind of have that experience for themselves. But yeah, because there are 3 brides, so there are 3 characters in this book, and all 3 of them respond differently to the toxicity of Dracula and how he is different to each of them, even though it's like a shared relationship. Essentially, I really like this book because it goes into a lot of layers. And I think just the writing is amazing. This is my first time reading this author, and I'm so interested to see what she comes up with next. It was kind of ended on a cliffhanger, but not exactly, because everyone got their kind of resolutions pretty nicely. But I think there is a second book in the series. I don't know if it's going to follow the same format or if it's going to be like a completely different you know, storyline. But no matter what it was, I really enjoyed this, and I think this is one of the books, especially the audiobook, that I would keep coming back to, because the audiobook narrator was fantastic. She was fantastic. She had Dracula's voice like nailed down, and she also had the voice of Constanza and Magdalena and all of his other, you know, brides, all of them so perfectly backed. I think the audiobook narrator did an amazing job. And so if you can pick this one up on audio, I would highly recommend it. But if you also want to pick it in terms of an EPUB or a PDF or a physical copy, I would also highly recommend this one because it was amazing. So yeah, you've made it till the end of the video, and so have I. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope that from this wrap up you could find something that you would like to read more. And that's it, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.